everyone, welcome back to my channel. It's been quite a while since I've uploaded any videos on here. I think it's been about 11 months, but I'm back. Hopefully for much longer than last time, but I'm here to make some high quality tutorials for you guys. Today we're going to be taking a look at Fusion, which is a Roblox UI library, which helps you make complex user interfaces using code. So instead of defining your UI in, for example, a screen UI, putting a frame in here, instead of doing it like this, you actually have to make it using code, which sounds a little bit counterintuitive, but it has a lot of useful things that come with it, which I will show you in this tutorial. Okay, so the first thing you're going to want to do is download Fusion, which will be the first link I have in the description. This website is very well documented. It has tons of examples and tutorials that you can see for literally anything related to Fusion. So to download it, it really depends on how you have your project set up. If you know nothing about Rojo or Wally or anything like that, what you're just going to do is press download, and then it'll take you to the GitHub. Scroll down a lot until you see fusion.rbxm. And then you just simply have to drag and drop this into Roblox like this. Boom, now you have Fusion. So if you're using Rojo, you can skip this part if you're not. If you're using Rojo, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to go here to Wally and then go to elttob/Fusion. Make sure you get elttob's version because he is the real creator of Fusion. All of the other versions are clones, so those are not the real version. Those will not be updated. But you just grab this, put this in your Wally file, and then boom. So now you have your Fusion module in here. What you're going to want to do is probably put this in a folder called something like packages. You can name this anything. Just wherever you have all of your module scripts for libraries will work. So I'll put this in here, and essentially we have Fusion installed. So now what we can do is put a script inside of our player. Your Fusion scripts are always going to be on the client because whenever you're rendering stuff, you want that to be handled on the client. That way, if for some reason something happens, then it won't lag out the server, and also you want to utilize the client's rendering capabilities, such as the CPU and GPU. So if we go ahead and get a reference to Fusion. Okay, so we have our reference to Fusion. Now what we're going to want to do is first we have to create a thing called a scope. So in Fusion, if I pull up the documentation real quick, it talks about scopes. So essentially they may seem a little bit complicated at first, but a scope really is just for memory management and cleaning up things that you might want to get rid of in the future. So there's two ways to do it. You can just use a table, but the easier way, in my opinion, is to use the scoped method. So what we're going to do is let me space it out like this. What I like to do with Fusion, and I see a lot of other people do this as well, is you should probably put your Fusion functions in its own variable, just so you don't have to do fusion.scoped every single time, because there's a few things that you're going to need to use a lot, and you really just don't want to have to type that whole thing out. So now we can simply start working on making our first UI. So what we can go ahead and do is local screen GUI equals, actually completely forgot to make our scope. Sorry about that. So first we're going to want to make our scope actually. So local scope equals scoped. And then inside of here, you're going to want to put a table. And then this table will take in a list of Fusion functions you're going to want to use. This seems a little bit confusing, especially if you've not used the previous versions of Fusion. But scopes are a new thing in Fusion 0.3, which is what you were using. And these, you just need to put in any function you're going to use. So to create an instance, so like to create a screen GUI or a frame or anything, you're going to use new. So if I go ahead and do new equals fusion.new, now what we can do is we can simply, okay, Roblox's AI keeps trying to suggest me stuff, but that's not the point. We can do scope : new, and then square brackets, or sorry, quotes, screen GUI, and then square brackets after that. So in Luau, you probably already know this, or you might know this. You don't have to put the parentheses. So if I do scope : new, parentheses, screen GUI, and then parentheses like that, this is the exact same as that. You don't have to put the parentheses, except it is much cleaner like this. So I always suggest writing your code out like this instead, because having your code like this, it looks ugly, it's clunky, and it's just very cluttered. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we want to parent this to the player, so, or the player GUI, so we need to get a reference to the player also. Local player equals game.players.local player. Parent equals player.player GUI. And then we can also set a name. I'm going to call this example GUI. So basically this function will take in the name of the instance as well as a table of properties. So if I run the game, obviously nothing's going to happen. We have not added anything to our screen GUI, but if I open up my player, you can see example GUI. This is because I set the parent property to the player GUI. Now, obviously, the next step is going to be adding some children. In Fusion, there's a special key that you use for this. It's just called children. So I'm going to do local children equals fusion.children. Again, this is just so we can easily access this without having to type it again. We literally, the only thing we have to do for this is the key will be children, and then equals, and then have a table. And now we can just put a list of new things in here. So if I do new frame, boom, we have our frame. We can put name this has to be scope : new. We can put hello size equals udim2.new 0.5 let me do from scale 0.5 0.5. This will make it half the screen size. Position equals udim2.new 0.5 0.5. Actually, this also has to be from scale. And then anchor point equals vector2.new 0.5 0.5. So you kind of have to, if you're not using Visual Studio Code with Rojo, what you're gonna have to do is kind of memorize the properties. Or something else you can do is just put a screen GUI anywhere and then just take a look at everything. So position, if I forget the name, or sorry, I need to put a frame, not a screen GUI. If I take a look at position, so I remember that the name of that is position, but let's say I don't remember what anchor point is called. I can just scroll down and, oh yeah, it's called anchor point. Now I can do this, and if I run the game, I should have a frame on the screen, half the size, in the center, which is perfect. That's exactly what we wanted. So now, obviously, this doesn't do much. We literally just have a simple frame inside of a screen GUI in the player that we made with code. Although the thing about us making this in code is that now we can really do some powerful things with this. So now let's learn about a thing called values. So a value is essentially a variable that Fusion can internally know when it changes. So if you change a value, it will automatically change what's in the UI. So let's say I have a value, I'll call it, let's do local counter equals scope value, and then we have to give it a default value. Let's do 0. And I'm also going to get rid of this frame. Actually, I'm just going to change it to a text button. What I can do is text equals counter. So if I run the game, it actually won't have anything because I forgot in Fusion, by default, it'll make everything sized as 0. So we need to do our little thing again, which will be annoying, but... Okay, perfect. So it says 0. Now, if I go ahead and change this to 2, for example. Awesome. Now it says 2. The text is a little bit small, so how about we go ahead and... So if I do text size equals... We can actually just do text scaled. So if I set this to text scaled, it will set it to the size, the maximum size that it could be. Now it says 2. So how about we do a little handy dandy thing, and I go ahead and make it so when you press the button, it's going to end up increasing the number by 1. And it will automatically reflect on our UI because we have our value here that's being referenced by the text. This may seem a little bit confusing at first, but I promise you it'll be super simple. So if I go ahead and do local on event equals fusion.onEvent, now I just have to do this on event, and then we need to pass in the name of the event. So when the button is pressed, it's going to be activated. We can see that here in the Fusion docs. For buttons, it's activated. I'm not fully sure because I believe normally in Roblox, it's mouse button 1 click or something like that. So I'm not 100% sure why that is, but maybe I'm just wrong. So, what we have to do now is... Okay, so now what we're going to want to do is have a function here. It doesn't need to take in anything. I believe we can make it take in stuff, except we don't really have to. So, what we're going to want to do is counter set. And then we also have to grab a function from Fusion called peak. So peak, it's kind of weird. In Fusion 0.3, it's different. If you were in 0.2, you could just do counter get, although that doesn't exist. So we have to do peak counter +1. So this should, in theory, increase the number by 1. Boom. Take a look at that. Look at how easy that was. And all of our logic is in the code right alongside the UI. So by itself, this might not seem too powerful, but now we're really going to get into the fun stuff. So now I'm going to show you how to make components in Fusion. If you've done any sort of web dev and you've worked with React, then this might be familiar to you, but you can do a thing called creating components, which are reusable bits of UI, which you can pass stuff into. So let's say we want to have multiple of these counters. What I like to do is I create a folder in replicated storage called components, and then I just create a module script for each one. So let's call this counter button, and then we have to return a function. You don't have to return a function. You can return a table that has this function, although I just find this much cleaner in my opinion. This should return a fusion. This should return a fusion instance at some point. So what we're going to go ahead and do is get our references to fusion. So we can just, for the most part, we can just grab all of this from the top. Let's get rid of player. We need scoped. We might need we need peaked. I think that's it. So really what we can do is just copy all of this, paste this in here, and then we also need our counter actually. So I'm going to put our counter here. Let's start it back at 0. And I believe this is actually all we need. Although, how about we do a little thing and let's give it a background color 3. Except what we're actually going to do is we're going to make this we're going to make our function take in props, which stands for properties, and we're going to type hint this as a table. And what we can do is we'll give it a key called background color 3, which will be an optional color 3. So in case you're not too familiar with how this works, props will be a table. This is forcing it to be a table, which will take a key and a value. One of the keys will be named background color 3, and it will be a color 3, but it will be optional because we have this question mark. So what we can do is background color 3 equals props.background color 3 or color3.new 0 1 0. So that'll be a green. So what this does is this gives us a default color of green, but if we specify the background color, it will be whatever we set it to. So we should actually be able to get rid of some of this stuff because we're not using it here. We don't need that. We don't need that. Okay, perfect. So if we get a reference to our counter button, look at how easy this is. We just have to call counter button, and we don't have to put parentheses because of the way Lua works. And then this one, we're going to do background color 3 equals color3.new. Let's make this red. And then let's make one more, except this time, how about we don't give it a background color? Now it looks like we have an error. This is probably the most common error you're going to run into in Fusion, just forgetting or adding an extra comma. So we don't have anything, and I believe I know why. Okay, it was really easy. We just forgot to return the text button. So that should have been obvious, but it looks like actually these are both overlaid on top of each other. So how about we add a UI list layout so that they're on top of each other inside of here. So let's add, I'm going to cut this, so Control X, and then let's do new UI list layout, boom. Scope : new. And then children, nope, never mind. We're actually going to keep this, sorry, because we don't want it inside of the UI list layout. If we run this now, we have our 2 buttons, and it looks like they work the same, which is because our counter is actually acting for both of them, because we want to put it inside of our function. So that way there's not one for each. It creates a new counter value every time you make a new component. So now we have both of our counter buttons. They work independently. If we want to change this, so let's say we want every counter to have a UI corner, for example, we can do children equals scope new UI corner radius equals udim.new let's do 0, 10 maybe. So that should make a UI corner with 10 pixels in radius. So that's awesome. So take a look at that. You can probably already see the use case of this. Let's say we have a button that we want to reuse in our games that we want to be able to easily change at any time. We could just make a component for our button. So we would just pass in, for example, an image that the button will have inside of it or some text. And then we can have a color and other things like that. So it's very useful. You can make very powerful UI. A lot of popular games use UI frameworks such as Fusion. They don't always use Fusion. Fusion is just the one that I prefer. There's also React, there's Vide. There's a few other options, but this is my favorite solution to UI frameworks on Roblox, and I hope that you can find some use out of this. Let me know if there's anything I missed in the comments, or if you have any feedback. It's been quite a while since I've made videos, so I might be a little bit rusty, but hopefully you guys enjoyed, and thanks for watching.